Moving on now, the US Defense Secretary calls on NATO to target what he calls Islamist militants. Leon Panetta says the alliance must reinvent itself to be able to respond to new threats from the so-called Islamic militancy. He says despite shrinking budgets, NATO has to face the challenges. He also noted the new US defense strategy calls for a rebalance of power towards the Asia-Pacific region.
We are discussing in Washington some of the...
Well, from Madison, I'm joined by Dr. Kevin Barrett, author and Islamic Studies Expert. Welcome to the program. So, Dr. Barrett, the first question that comes to mind is that how does Washington define Islamist militants?
Well, that's a very complicated question because, in fact, Washington is supporting some of the worst and most retrograde Islamic militants in places like Syria, while it is pretending to oppose various Islamic militants elsewhere. The elements that are keeping Washington bogged down in Afghanistan are doing so to protect the heroin business, which is about a $1.5 billion trillion per year industry, and they need some Islamic militants to excuse their presence there. So it's quite complicated. I think overall, though, the powers that be are concerned about the Islamic renaissance that's happening today. They're concerned that Muslims are winning the demographic race with the Israelis, and that Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. And Islam has some tenets that don't sit well with the Rothschild bankers and other brokers of power. In Islam, we do not allow lending at interest. That's called Riba. So the entire world banking system, which more and more people are understanding is a fraud, is absolutely haram or forbidden in Islam. So I think there is a real concern with the rise of Islam among Western strategists, but they are playing all sorts of power games by supporting some Islamic militants and opposing others.
Indeed, and again, speaking about NATO, I mean, we spoke about NATO with our previous guest. Just how imminent is the threat of NATO becoming an aggressive power that, according to itself, should also expand, according to Leon Panetta, it should expand its activities to the Asia-Pacific region?
Well, Leon Panetta seems to want NATO to become the world's policeman. And he's trying to reinvent a role for NATO, which really lost its reason for being after the end of the Cold War. Today, the European countries have cut their military spending down to around 2% of gross national product. And the U.S. has been complaining about that, but the U.S. is going to have to cut its military spending as well. NATO is really obsolete. So Panetta is just trying to make the best out of a bad situation by claiming that NATO will have these sort of global policeman roles all over the world with no focus whatsoever. And I don't think it's going to fly.
Indeed. Dr. Kevin Barrett, author and Islamic Studies Expert from Madison. Thanks for your thoughts there, sir.
Thank you.